Okay.
Okay, good, good. All right, so let me share my screen. Can you all see my screen? Hello? Hello, can we see my screen? Can anyone hear me at all?
Yes, I can
Yes,
see
we
your
can see your
screen.
screen.
Okay, good, good, good. So you're welcome once more again. So today we are talking on the application of machine learning techniques in petrophysical modeling. This will be handled by a very renowned industry expert in the person of Mr. Tunde Farotumi. This is just a brief profile about Tunde Farotumi. He's a seasoned WRM consultant with Cypher Crescent Limited. He holds a bachelor's degree in geology from the University of Ilorin. He has over 10 years experience working in field development studies, oil and gas asset management and computing. He started his career as a content development specialist for Senfos Limited, a foremost Nigerian infotech company. He later joined Cypher Crescent Limited in 2015, where he partook in several projects, including strategic geologic database development for SAPEL technology, reservoir database set, and quality checking, as well as production system data integration. Tunde possesses quite a depth of knowledge in geoscience and petroleum engineering, with good insight of upstream oil and gas. He has been involved in several projects, including asset evaluation, feed development studies, corporate process digitization review, integrated WRM process framework setup, WRM framework benchmarking, data democratization, operationalization of WRM analytics for intervention, opportunity identification, and increased asset performance for many E&P companies in Nigeria. He is a core member of the technical capacity development team, providing rudimentary and advanced training to professionals in the oil and gas industry and institution of higher learning on advances in WRM techniques and technology. Today has keen interest in solving problems with advanced analytics, and he has contributed massively and immensely to critical WRM project success across several fields in Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Tunde Fora Timi. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, sir. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Am I audible? Just to confirm.
Yes, yes, we
Okay.
can hear you very well. Yes, sir.
Okay.
You're welcome,
All
sir.
right, sir. Yeah, thank you so
Yes.
much. So let me just let me share my screen. So
Okay.
I don't know if I should share my slide here or you can share from your end.
So you could share so that it will give you the leverage to move back and forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Just a minute, please. Uh, okay. So let me know if my screen is up.
Yes, we can see this slide.
To be this session today, and I'm always very eager when I have the opportunity to actually join the NAPE community, and it's actually refreshing today to anchor this session. So just as said, in the next few minutes, we'll be looking at the application of machine learning techniques in petrophysical modeling. So see how it can be applied in our processes, and then we will try to make problem statements, because a lot has been done in terms of machine learning techniques, AI, currently, and I've seen so many young professionals picking it up, which is quite a good one. But I think we need to actually make a case when to apply it, and then how are we even applying it? Are we doing it the right way? And then see how this can be leveraged with current expertise, because machine learning does not mean that we are discarding the old way of doing things, whereas we're supposed to actually make it better. We'll just look at some of those workflows and then see how machine learning can actually improve petrochemical data modeling and improve in all, in terms of the static modeling, property estimation, and then actually reducing uncertainty in volumes estimation. So we'll just proceed. I'll go to the next slide. Yeah. So this is more of like looking at what has happened in the industry. This is more like an icebreaker. So a lot has been happening in the industry. We've seen this is actually a case of a drilling going on in Germany, going on in South Korea, and it's being controlled from Germany. You can see miles apart. So not only in that area of drilling, in medicine, a lot has been done. We have in terms of surgery, we still have self-driving cars. Generally, industry, we've seen a whole lot, and then we've seen capability of what machine learning can do in terms of enhancing efficiency. So this is more of like a case of what 5G technology could do in terms of unmanned drilling, miles apart, but efficiency was was gained, not minding terrain, distance apart, but they were able to actually to achieve that, and that's the extent of what technology could do. So basically, the summary of what we'll be looking at today is that basically during petrophysical modeling, one key point what we normally have is the control point we have is we have petrophysical property from the wells, porosity, permeability at well location, gamma ray resistivity helps us to understand geology. From there, we can establish our correlation. But major issue comes into play where we have scenario whereby we have we want to predict property of the well location by the time we're trying to estimate our property model, because we're not looking at only the well location, rather we're looking at property distribution of the well location, and then this is where we leverage geostatistical techniques like kriging and all of those. But just as we said, the error is actually inherent in the sense that we need enough well data, for example, when we're using when we want to start in terms of variograms function, and being able to get a very good variogram function that will enable us get correlation of properties and being able to actually predict the properties very well. But in such scenario where we don't have, sorry, just a minute, please.
Sorry to cut you. I don't know if you unshared your screen.
We can't see okay, no, I'm seeing sharing. You can just give me a minute. Judith, please come help me pick Ive. Sorry, apologies. Is my screen up now?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. All right. Okay, so what I've said is that if you want to predict properties of the well location, and then meaning that we have sparse distribution, what we're actually leveraging on is based on various geostatistical techniques, we've actually been able to get a very good variogram function that helps us to establish spatial correlation of data, and then the algorithm cannot be used. But in scenarios whereby we have sparse world distribution, it becomes tedious, and then the variogram function is actually limiting in the sense that property distribution of the world location, we have less lower level of confidence in such data, and then this is where machine learning actually comes in. So we're looking at how we can actually integrate seismic data to help us improve this prediction, because just as we said, well data, they have a good vertical resolution in terms of log data, but seismic data has a very good better horizontal resolution. So leveraging this, combining these the two data sets, we can see how this can help us have a better property distribution, interwell spacing between wells, so of our well location have better property distribution, and how this can be integrated into a variogram function that will actually aid better statistical modeling. So at the end of the day, what we're just trying to look at is that how machine learning could help us improve this statistical modeling and then reduce our uncertainty. At the end of the day, ultimately leading to improved reservoir characterization. Will first be discussed. Yes, can I still be heard? I just need a confirmation I can be heard.
Yes, although we lost you for a second, but we can hear you now.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
We can hear
So
you.
just
Yes.
a brief of the outline. We'll be looking at machine learning adoption across the oil and gas industry, overview of geoscience studies, and then we'll see the traditional techniques, physical modeling, and then beyond that, we'll now see how machine learning can be leveraged, the approach, try to establish a problem statement, and then the way forward in terms of actually improving the traditional way of doing things, the physical modeling, and then look at future outlook, and then a conclusion. So from the advent of time, humans has always actually been very inquisitive in terms of technology, trying to improve our way of doing things. We can see in the 60s, in the 18th century, Industry 1.0, from era of steam engine, where to the 19th century, Industry 2.0, whereby we have automation of production lines, to the 20th century, and where we're talking about automation, computing, and all. And then in the 21st century that we're here now, talking about Industry 4.0, which is era of big data, robotics, as in what digital technologies could help us do. And of recent, that people haven't said we've gone past Industry 4.0, we're actually in era of 5.0 because of the AI, advanced computing, 5G, and a very, very amazing time, interesting times, and see how advanced analytics can actually improve the way we actually do things. So this is actually a brief overview. You can see this is the data room of ADNOC. So ADNOC is actually, just as you know, Abu Dhabi Drilling Oil Company, which is actually one of the companies in the world that actually leverage digital technology. This is actually their data room where they can monitor thousands of wells. So, but this adoption is actually not the same all across, because if you look at the rating that was done by a particular firm in 2021, oil and gas industry is actually, the energy industry as a whole was actually rated 3% in terms of adoption of digital technology, compared to transportation, compared to manufacturing, and how they've actually leveraged this digital technology. And the reason, not far-fetched, we know that the oil and gas industry, the energy industry as a whole, is a capital intensive, and actually people are actually risk averse. So to start with, how and when do we even think about leveraging these artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques and all of those things? First criteria is we need to have a whole lot of data for the system to actually learn on. And looking at, for example, a drilling rig actually generates up to around 10 terabytes of data in a day. So how are we leveraging this? And currently, we can vividly say that we're using less than 1% of these data sets. So we need to find a way in which these data sets can actually be used to improve our analysis in terms of even drilling, and then see how better insight can be gotten. It's possible real-time interpretation of petrophysical properties, even up to gamma ray resistivity as drilling is going on, because we have a very robust machine learning model, and we'll be looking at how all those are actually achievable. So we have various areas where machine learning can be applied, from exploration to drilling optimization, reservoir characterization and modeling, which we'll be talking about today. We have production monitoring and optimization, a very huge area which machine learning can be leveraged, and then facility management, and then crude evacuation. Those are key areas in which we can actually apply machine learning. Or today, we'll be looking at the reservoir characterization and modeling. So our problem case actually falls into geoscience field. So where we have the geology, the petrophysicists, and then the geophysicists. The major aim is actually to be able to have a geo model, a Earth model that is actually very representative. Nobody is there in the subsurface, but we just want to have a realistic overview based on the data set that we're seeing, and to have an impression of what it's actually down there in the subsurface. And then which from history, we've seen geoscientists, they actually been doing a whole lot to ensure that the exploration activities are improved, the oil reserves are easily actually detected. Sorry, just a minute.
Okay, Akombiola, do you have a question? Someone is saying you can't see the screen, but I can see the screen over here. Is any other person not seeing the screen? I think maybe that would be due to your own network also. But I can actually see the screen, and
I
a lot of
also can't see the screen, sir. I can't see the screen. It's blank.
is blank as well. Is there any
I can
other
see the
person?
screen, though. I can see the screen
Yes,
from my end.
I can see it over here as well. So I'm thinking that should be a network issue from your side. Akombiola, do you have anything to say? Your hand is raised, and Blessing as well.
Yeah, I can't see the screen as well.
Please check your network. Please check your network. All right, sir. I think we can continue.
All right, okay, thank you so much. So sorry for that. So just as mentioned, that what we'll be looking at today falls within the geoscience regime, and REM rather. So where we have the geologists, the petrophysicists, and then the geophysicists. All what we're just trying to do is actually to have a very good 3D impression of the subsurface. So just as we mentioned, nobody is down there, but what we're just trying to do is that based on the acquired data, seismic data, well log data, to be able to have actually a fair impression of actually the subsurface structure and then the hydrocarbon accumulation, which means that our actually analysis at this stage is actually very critical. And then the assumptions that are being made fit downstream into petroleum engineering in terms of reservoir engineering, volume estimation, recovery volume estimation, and all. So today, just as we said, we'll be looking at petrophysical modeling, and then to just go about the whole workflow, we get to petrophysical modeling. In geoscience space, we can say we'll start from seismic interpretation, where we'll pick our horizons, we'll pick the faults, and from there, we can move over to structural modeling. We've gotten the structural framework from seismic. We've moved from time domain to depth domain, done the well to seismic time, and then we'll move to structural modeling. From structural modeling, we'll actually get the fractural framework. Petrophysical modeling basically starts from our well location, just as we mentioned. We have measured data from wells, we have gamma ray, resistivity, and then we have estimated properties in terms of porosity using a density log and all of those things. So from petrophysical modeling, get properties at well location, and then from there, we can know that we'll do the upscaling. So from our well location 3D grid cells, we'll upscale the properties to cells along the well paths. And then from there, we can now use geostatistical techniques get a very good variogram function that will help us distribute the properties of the well location, which is the area in which we'll be focusing today. And then once we've done that, we'll distribute the properties, and then that can now feed into volume estimation. In our step equation, we have porosity, permeability, and also once we get a very good property distribution, and those estimations can be made. So, but before we proceed, just what is happening in a traditional traditional algorithm, what has been happening is that we have an input, we impute that into a mathematical model. So these models, basically, they just being developed based on experience, a whole lot of data. People work with a whole lot of data, get relationship between these data sets, define the physics, get this equation, and then that particular mathematical model is now what the computer program is being instructed on how to do. We get our input into that mathematical model. So the computer is actually instructed to execute that particular program, and then we'll get our output. So what we're seeing basically is that the traditional algorithms, in terms of what we've been doing, is that we have a particular set of data based on the correlation that we've gotten, impute those parameters, and then they will be able to actually give us the required output. So in the case of the property estimation, so from we have variograms. So based on from well location, for example, we want to predict porosity from well location. We have those porosity values. We have a very good experimental variograms based on well placement for a particular reservoir. Based on that, we get at what distance you can see that properties can be autocorrelated, meaning that from well location to well location, we're seeing where property distributions can be correlated together. And from there, we'll be able to establish, maybe from 5 meters, 100 meters, 20 meters, we can see that, okay, properties from this no longer predict it well, because the well placement around that place is actually sparse. So we get a function that is actually describing the distribution of properties, which the computer uses to actually give us the output. And the output which we're getting are actually those properties. But we want to actually, the advent of machine learning and AI as a whole has actually made people to have a rethink to see how the whole process can actually be improved. So before we step into what our problem statement is, we'll just try to get a very good overview of what machine learning is. And I think kudos again to the YPs for what they've been doing. And I mentioned I've met a lot of persons working on, especially in this area of property modeling. But what I've seen in some cases, people have actually done well, but what I've seen in some cases is that we don't really define the problem statement very well. And in terms of what we're trying to do, the whole process becomes very cumbersome. So what we'll be looking at today is how this technique can even be leveraged at a very small scale. Even practicing professionals too can actually leverage this. This can actually be a very good starting point, develop a very a realistic machine learning model for you. You're working on a particular reservoir. You can develop a machine learning model that will help predict properties better and help reduce the uncertainty we're working on. So just as a whole, we know machine learning is actually a subset of artificial intelligence, and then machine learning can be grouped based on the problem we're solving into supervised learning, unsupervised, and reinforcement learning. So supervised learning in the sense that when we have a labeled data, and then we're saying that based on this particular data sets, this is what I want to get. So we'll train the machine learning model based on that, train the model A equals B. We train the machine learning model, and at the end of the day, we'll actually now predict which is the objective function, as the case may be. When if you're talking about the modeling, so we actually predict B, for example. So in the case of unsupervised learning, we're not labeling the data. We just have some set of data. So what is happening is that the computer program will actually use patterns, relationship, and actually get a group. So in unsupervised learning, we'll be talking about clustering, dimensionality reduction. So we just using the relationship between the data sets to put them in various groups, and then you can use that to actually classify them based on those various classes, based on those patterns, and group the data, and then you can now based on those various different groups, use that to actually classify these assets. And in terms of reinforcement learning, this is more of like a reward system whereby we're supplying data sets and some cases, some people will call it semi-supervised, but we just a system whereby it's more of like a reward system. You tip once the system predicts it very well, learns better, more of like how we train a kid, get it.
Is anyone hearing him at all, or it's just on my own side?
I've lost contact. Can't hear anything.
Okay, okay. I think he is
Problem.
there.
So
Hello,
I
sir.
can hear him clearly too.
I think we lost you for
oh,
like
sorry.
30 seconds. We lost you for
Oh,
like 30
sorry,
seconds.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so
At the
have I
previous
moved to
slide.
this slide before that time?
No, the previous slide.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
at the
right.
tail end of that previous slide, yes.
Okay, let me just go back. So what we're saying, so I was saying, I say that reinforcement learning is more of like reward system. You actually tip the system once you actually predict the properties, right? So now saying that today, the problem statement we're trying to solve falls within the realm of supervised learning. So meaning that we'll be dealing with label data sets. So try to drill down to what type of problem we're trying to solve. Supervised learning can be divided into classification problem and regression problem. So what's actually a classification problem? So if my required response is actually A or B, so a boy or a girl. So I actually label the cat, feed it into a computer program, and after a while, put several images. Is this a cat? Yes or no? So this is more of like a classification problem. So for a labeled data set that the data, so we can make that one is actually discrete. So for a labeled data set that we're not expecting a yes or no answer. For example, I want to buy a house in various several cities. So I'm looking at the location, I'm looking at the size of the house and all of those things. So that's actually a regression problem. And in that range. So we want to actually predict porosity. So that's what we'll be looking at. And then what are the input data sets that we'll be looking at? The various data sets that are labeled, but porosity, as we know, is actually a continuous data set. Various data ranges, we know porosity based on if we're dealing with a sandstone reservoir, we know that maximum porosity based on their genesis and all of those things will be like around 40%. So we know that the data range could be 10, could be 15. So it's actually a continuous data set. So meaning that we're actually dealing with actually a regression problem. And once we can define this, that will even help us in terms of machine learning algorithms that we want to use. So first, as people are actually taking up these various machine learning techniques, these are actually the key areas where to actually start from. Start to create that pinpoint. Okay, this is actually the problem. This is what I want to solve. What type of machine learning techniques am I actually using? So once that is recognized, then we can now progress. So basically, what do we want to achieve? So traditional way I've mentioned, I actually get inputs based on algorithms that are actually being computed. I fed input into those algorithms, instruct the computer to actually execute, and I get my output. But what machine learning is actually doing is that we have input and output. So I've labeled my input and I've labeled the output, fed it into a computer program. So the computer program understands the data very well. So in terms of my label data, I have various data sets, my gamma ray, for example, gamma ray, resistivity, density log. I get that relationship, and then I fed it into the computer program. So computer program understands the relationship between those data sets. So it could be for a particular reservoir, understand the relationship. So based on that, actually create a model. So meaning that creates like a function that establishes the relationship between these data sets. So what that is, once that is, so that's a machine learning model. So I get my input and output fed into computer program. Based on that, computer program establishes that relationship and then create the machine learning model for me. So the model now, in the areas whereby we don't have the complete data set, I now feeding my data set into the model. Based on the relationship that was originally established, the computer, the model will now give me the output. So meaning that once I have my machine learning model, I give my input into that machine learning model based on the established understanding. The computer program acts on it and gives me the output. Unlike the traditional way in which we have correlations, we have algorithms. Once we key in our input, we instruct the computer to actually give us output based on those relationships. But this approach is actually a data-driven approach whereby we take off some of the basic assumptions in some cases which might actually be limiting. So we start from machine learning model, we train a model, get that relationship. Once we have that machine learning model, then we can now predict. So what in essence are we trying to do in this case is that we're actually taking a whole lot in terms of, in case of a porosity prediction, so normally, just as we've mentioned, normally from wells, we'll get porosity from, so basically you drill a well, get a petrophysical properties, gamma ray, density log. So for example, let's say we estimated porosity using density log for our wells. So, and in that particular field, the wells are not that much. So we know that basically from those porosity at well location, we'll be able to establish a variogram. So this is what we're saying. So we'll be able to establish a variogram. I don't know if you can see my cursor, if my cursor is visible.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay,
Yes.
so this is actually a scenario we are trying to paint. So in this scenario now, actually, this is actually a data for maybe a particular horizon in a reservoir. So these are actually predictions from well. So we can see from here, around here. So, and on the horizontal zone, is my distance. So from a particular point, we can see that areas whereby properties can be autocorrelated, where properties are the same, we can see them that they are autocorrelated. These are all those various points. So from our variogram function, and then when we get to a range of, for example, for a particular distance, maybe 100 meters away, 200 meters away, whereby the properties is not actually affected by that particular location, you can now see these semi-variance. We can see this is my seal, whereby properties cannot be autocorrelated. So what we're trying to establish is that the traditional way of doing things is that based on those well location, we'll get an from experimental variogram, we'll have a variogram function. So like this one now, this will give us a function which we can now use to actually predict properties, then predict properties in areas that we don't actually have. But what is this data-driven technology? What is it actually bringing into the case? They can give us a scenario whereby we can better estimate, even before we get to this variogram function, we can better estimate in some locations that we don't have wells. We can put some pseudo wells there, and we're having a realistic confidence in properties we're estimating in those locations. And then it helps us improve this variogram function, and then the petrophysical modeling can actually improve better. So, and then to actually do that, we'll be leveraging seismic data. So just as mentioned, I mentioned that well log data has good horizontal resolution, but seismic data has a very good vertical resolution. And then when we're talking about seismic data, actually a very huge data set, we're talking about data set in the range of gigabyte to petabyte. It has good horizontal resolution, just as mentioned. And then we have around over 300 seismic attributes. So seismic attributes are actually data set that can actually be extracted from this seismic tube, from seismic data. So we have over 300 of these attributes that's actually telling us something about the formation that we're talking about, but these have actually not been leveraged. Currently, we have around maybe less than 10 or about 10 seismic attributes that which is often used in the industry for improved seismic data interpretation. But we want to see a scenario whereby we want to improve the usage, how these seismic attributes can actually be leveraged for better petrophysical property for estimation. So, and we have various seismic attributes. So depending on the property we want to estimate, from lithology to structure. So we have various categories. We have the instantaneous attributes, geometric attributes, amplitude versus offsets. So based on the type of property we want to estimate. So for example, we want to do false interpretation. Rather than the false picking, we can get a very seismic attributes that have a very good relationship with false. So for example, instantaneous attributes, just like instantaneous frequency, reflection strength, and all of those, get all those, and then we use that, do seismic inversion to get all those properties. And with that, it can give us a better visualization. So in terms of picking of fault, we'll see how you can better pick those faults. So those are areas in which seismic data can be leveraged. I want to see how we can leverage that in porosity prediction. So just as mentioned, the use cases we have from fault identification, porosity prediction, fascist classification, permeability. There are other use cases, but these are just the ones listed here. So for a particular use case, so what we'll be looking at is this actually is a top structure map from a reservoir. This is actually the reservoir that we'll be using. So what we have here is that we have 10 wells, but out of those 10 wells, we're able to actually use 4 wells for this machine learning model development. And why did that happen? So first, we just know that machine learning as a whole, or even programming as a whole, is actually, we can say it's garbage in, garbage out. So that's why the data fidelity is actually very, very important. So what we did initially was just to actually QC the data, get a very good relationship. So for example, for example, in gamma ray, we have some areas whereby the two malfunction, the reading actually not within the range of what we're expecting. We have maybe invasion zone whereby the resistivity and all those other properties that are not actually okay. The density we're getting are actually okay. So we actually looked at the data set. We actually properly clean up the data. So what the data set we use for developing the machine learning from the 4 wells were gamma ray, density, porosity, which we want to predict, and then we use the acoustic impedance, which is the seismic attribute that we actually used for this modeling. So after the data cleaning, we saw that it's only 4 wells that have a good data set for the model setup. So after that, we went to data visualization, ensure that the data set is actually okay. Then we review the particular task, just as we've been doing now, review the tasks we want to do, review the problem statement, and see the model that is actually good for us to actually develop this machine learning model that will actually develop a predictive machine learning model for us. Then once that is done, we'll have a model evaluation. So we have the data set we actually divided into training data sets and actually prediction. So we have around 80% of the data for training. And then once we're done, we use the other 20% to predict what the data set is supposed to give us. So what we're doing in this case is that we have a gamma ray density, porosity, and acoustic impedance for all the wells we use for training data sets. So, and then as training data sets. And then the last data that I want to use for prediction, we just supplied all the data sets minus the porosity. And then we actually saw what the production porosity, the predicted porosity. And then after which we compared it with the actual. So so what we're saying in this case is that we're doing model evaluation and tuning. So before we can say a machine learning model is okay, before we deploy it, we need to actually train it on an existing data set. So we know that particular well has a porosity data, and then we want to see this gamma ray density, porosity, and acoustic impedance that we've been able to get a relationship within those data sets initially. We've trained the model, and then the model now will feed in our other data sets, gamma ray density and acoustic impedance, and where we predicted porosity, and see how the model performed. So in this case, we have two case studies, two scenarios rather, when we're trying to actually solve the model. We have scenario 1. So what we notice is that while we have squared correlation of 0.484. So what we're actually looking at was actually the problem is, and all of this. So we're using 4 wells. So we're using 3 wells as actually the training data set, and then using 1 well to test the data. So we're trying various scenarios, but we're seeing that the prediction is actually not okay. So later we actually be removing some of these data sets, removing some of this well, and at some point we have a squared correlation of 0.94, which is better. So then we're trying to see, okay, what is actually really happening? Try to drill down what is actually causing this issue. So just as we've mentioned, so one thing that we've observed is that for a machine learning model, what we need is actually we need huge data sets, just as we mentioned. For example, this model can be deployed for the whole of Niger data, get so many wells. But what I'm even preaching now is that let's start from a very small scale. So maybe, for example, a particular reservoir, you know the number of wells in that particular reservoir, pick the wells in those reservoirs, pick their log data, and then try to do seismic, extract these various seismic attributes, know that you get the seismic attribute that is very good at predicting a particular property. So in this case, when we're trying to drill down the data sets, we noticed that the 4 wells that we're using, we have one well, which is well 10, which is at the eastern flank here. So where we're actually training the whole data sets together, we're training with these 3, and we're actually predicting porosity for this well. So what we notice is that this particular data set, so if it's an area, if it's a reservoir that reservoir property, reservoir is homogeneous, this wouldn't have happened. But this is actually, what this is telling us that this is actually an heterogeneous system. Sorry if you can see my mouse. So this is an heterogeneous system. So we have these 3 wells around here towards the western flank, and we have this particular, okay, this is well 10, yes, well 10 towards the eastern flank. So we actually train the machine learning model with these 3, and then we're predicting with this. So that was where we're getting a poor squared correlation. So what is actually invariably telling us is that the relationship that the model has been able to establish based on these 3 wells, the property is seen here actually deviates from that. So meaning that the model actually at this point is not robust enough to actually do that. So, but for example, for a case like we have good wells around here in terms of well control. We have wells here, and we take all these particular wells around here. The machine learning model would have been able to actually establish the trend to actually see how property degrades around here. And by the time we feed this in, based on the data sets and then the placement and the location, you can see that it will actually do better. So, and then what we're actually trying to do to estimate the squared error, we can see what we're looking at is that we're actually getting a fit. So what we're trying to do invariably is that, for example, let me say this is my model. So if I now supply a new data set around here, I can predict what this is. So this line, so let me say what we plotted is that we plotted porosity. We plotted porosity, the predicted porosity against the actual porosity. So this is the predicted porosity, this is the actual porosity. So we can now see that, for example, if I now have a new data set, this will be around here, and then it can help me actually predict water property. So what we're looking at here is that we're looking at for our error estimation, for example, we have a mean case, a mean model, and a square mean model. So in terms of what is happening here, you can see that the line, the linear regression, because this is we mentioned that is a regression problem, and this is actually a linear regression. So we actually, the model, these are fits, and then what is actually trying to get at each point in time is that we're getting differences from this line from our control points, and then we're having squared of all those error, and because this R square is actually a parameter that will help us check if our model is correct or not. So when we're getting R squared of 0.8 something, we know that, oh, this is still poor, we can do better. And when we got 0.9, we know that the prediction is actually increased. So just as we mentioned, so we observed that this particular well is far off from these other 3 wells, and based on that, the property that the model was predicting, the model is not doing well because the relationship, it does not understand what is happening here because the data set does not spatially correlate with the data set that we have here. So how can this problem be solved? So what we're saying is that with seismic attributes, we can extract. So this scenario that we use, we're looking at a single attribute. We use a single attribute in this prediction. So we used gamma ray, density, porosity, and acoustic impedance, which is the seismic seismic attribute we're using in this case. So, but what we're saying is that it's possible that we can use multi-attribute because this is actually still a work in progress, but I'm always very excited whenever I have opportunity to speak with the NAPE community, share and knowledge, and then how to see how things can be improved. So for property modeling, what we would have done initially was that based on this one, we would have gotten actually our experimental variogram would have gotten a variogram function, and then that variogram function, with that variogram function, we'll be able to predict what the properties between these wells are. And then in this scenario that we have a well that is actually far off, that's actually what will happen to the model will actually perform badly here, which is what the machine learning model is actually telling us. So what can we do in this case? So what we can do in this case is that we can extract seismic attributes. So in this case now we're doing a multi-attribute scenario whereby we extracted multiple seismic attributes and then one petrophysical properties. Based on that, we'll establish a very good relationship between those seismic attributes. And then by the time we do that, within these wells now, for example, so we get multiple seismic attributes, and then with porosity data. So once we can use that to predict what porosity data is for these wells, and then we'll come here, use those multiple seismic attributes, predict what the porosity data will be. And then by the time we go into our variogram function, the autocorrelation, the spatial distribution will be better compared to what was done. So basically what we're saying invariably is that for us to have a very good machine learning model, we need a huge data set. And then an additional problem that we face in this particular case study is that 60% of the data was discarded because it wasn't fit enough, they were erroneous. And we know that machine learning or analytics as a whole is actually garbage in, garbage out. And also we noticed, just as we mentioned, that well 10 to the northeastern end has huge disparity with the training data set. So showcasing that we
Hello, sir. I don't know. We lost you for a second.
okay,
When you were
okay,
talking
all right,
about
sir.
we're 10, you were just talking about we're 10.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. So just as I mentioned, so I said well 10, just as looking at well 10 here, that well 10 had huge disparity with the other three wells. So like we're saying that this reservoir is actually highly heterogeneous because it would be an homogeneous reservoir, we wouldn't be seeing that disparity. So it has a huge disparity with these other data sets. That's why the R squared was low. And then by the time we now predicted with two of these wells, trained with two of these wells, predicted when it was better. So what we're saying in this case is that I didn't mean we used multiple seismic attributes with one property. So we get that. So we use multiple seismic attributes with these wells. And then with one well property, with that, once we establish that relationship, we'll just come to this location that we don't even have well placement. Based on those seismic attributes that we've extracted, we'll place a well around that, calculate what the property will be, and then we can do that for various points around here. And time we are getting our variogram function, that will give us a better estimate of those properties, and then we actually reduce the uncertainty. So what we're looking at is that what's actually the benefits of actually the machine learning. We're looking at a scenario whereby we're taking towards a data-driven approach. We're not discussing the traditional technique as it were, because most of these days, that's what I'm saying with most of some machine learning projects. We just want to discard the traditional way and then pack in a whole lot of data, start doing prediction. But what we're preaching is that at this stage that we are now, we need to actually leverage this machine learning techniques with the traditional way of doing things. So just as the scenario we mentioned, we'll use that seismic attributes, estimate properties in locations where we don't even have wells. And by the time we do that, we'll have a better variogram function. So when that better variogram function will actually help us to have a better property prediction. So what we're seeing basically is actually we're going to an era that we're moving towards a data-driven approach. And in all those locations, for example, if we now want to drill a new well, we can even validate those properties, the properties that we've actually estimated validate it with the actual data. So with this approach, it will help us actually reveal features, properties, trends that actually very, very difficult to see. Just as we mentioned in case of maybe false interpretation and all of those things, by the time we extract certain attributes that actually have good relationship with faults, by the time we do the inversion, we'll see those faults well placed. Picking them will be much easier, and then improved efficiency, because with machine learning, we'll do things better at actually a faster pace. And then what we're saying is that at this case, we should leverage horizontal resolution of their seismic data, because we said well data has a good vertical resolution. Good vertical resolution. Our well data has good vertical resolution, and seismic data has good horizontal resolution. So we should leverage the good horizontal resolution that seismic data has to actually predict interwells property in between the wells, locations of the well that we don't actually have wells. So what this technical section will help us do, will help us predict those properties. And by the time we feed that into our variogram, experimental variogram, that will help us get a very good theoretical variogram, get a very good variogram function, and then we can be able to actually estimate those properties very well, which reduces the uncertainty. And just as we're seeing, which will also lead to improved spatial distribution of well control by the time we're looking at that variogram from our experimental variogram. So we have good well distribution, so we can get the autocorrelation, spatial relationship very well. And then what's improved the availability of well data for when we're doing analysis, we're doing well reviews, we can actually predict properties for a well that does not have gamma ray. Just the wells that are existing, get the seismic attributes, get good relationship with the gamma ray, and then we just impute into the model. The model will be able to predict the gamma ray, and then with that, we'll be able to have a better asset reviews in terms of log review. We're looking at sand development, fluid contact interpretation, and that, so we can missing cases of missing log will be actually tremendously reduced for us to have better asset review. So what's actually the challenges and limitations those I've mentioned? The data quality was actually a very big challenge. We have like 10 wells, we're able to use 4 because of the data was we have a spurious data at some point, erroneous data, so we have to clean it, get a very consistent data set for us to actually start the training. Because if we train a machine learning model with the data set that are not actually okay, that are not consistent, the model too will not be consistent. So we have to do that, do the data cleaning, and then what we're looking at interdisciplinary expertise. So it's actually very important that we actually relate with our colleagues and the petroleum engineers and then geoscientists. People come together as one, collaborate, discuss the problem statements, and then in scenarios, just as the scenario that we solve, complexity and geologic processes, we can see that heterogeneity. So that's what is actually causing that issue that we're actually having. But by time we understood what the problem is, and then we're able to actually see how we can have a very good prediction. So in this case now, that particular well, you want to predict what that property is, meaning that we need to actually now predict for some wells of those 3 wells that we used, and then we can able to have a very good prediction for that third well we're trying to do. And then adoption of digital technology and actually operational leverage too is actually challenging the industry. So just as we mentioned, the oil and gas industry as a whole is not leveraging digital technology as it should be, unlike the other industry, telecommunication, what they've been doing, tourism, what they've been doing, IT, what we're doing with virtual reality and all of those. So though we've seen some companies like Abu Dhabi Oil Company, what they're doing with their data room where they could stream thousands of wells, monitoring, real-time monitoring for thousands of wells. But that is not what is obtainable all around the world. So we can see that the leverage, the operational leverage is actually is not at par all over the world. So what's actually the look ahead? So look ahead would be, just as we mentioned, this particular case was actually, we're using multiple log data with a single seismic attribute. So look ahead would be to even leverage multi-attributes, multi-attribute analysis, whereby we can use multiple seismic data and use it to actually predict a particular log. So we pick up several seismic attributes. We pick frequency, instantaneous acoustic impedance, and then we use it to actually estimate properties. And then by the time we do that, we can estimate properties where we don't not even drill, and then we can, by the time maybe we're trying to do a new drill, by the time we're drilling, we're confirming it. So more of like seismic data becomes useful not only when because what we've seen in the industry currently is that after we've done the structural and initial seismic interpretation, the usage of seismic data is not as fascinating as it's supposed to be, because the only time we go back there is maybe we have issues with fault tree interpretation and all of those things. But with this particular case, we'll now be also be calibrating our seismic model. We'll also be calibrating our seismic model based on as we are actually developing the asset. So we're not waiting for case of maybe for the seismic and all of those. So that too will still help, but we're seeing that as we're managing the assets, we're also calibrating. So as we acquire new data from those seismic attributes, we actually estimate those properties. And then we know that larger amount of data training data sets. So for example, in maybe someone that wants to deploy a machine learning model for maybe the whole of Niger Delta, we need to actually acquire a whole lot. But what I'm able to say is that for each point, a start point for each and every one of us from this time, that when I want to look at around, maybe we're working on a particular reservoir, we can do that for that particular one, have a better estimate for that particular reservoir, and then increase the awareness among the geoscience community, students and professionals about the application of seismic attributes. And then we just, as mentioned earlier, improved usage of seismic attributes in 3D modeling. So we're not waiting till we're doing reinterpretation. We're estimating faults again and all of those things, that we're interpreting faults again, and all that's when we use seismic attributes. So this can even be used by the time we're developing the asset, property estimation from locations that we don't even have for us. Use these seismic attributes, get a good machine learning model, and then use it to actually predict your porosity, your permeability. With that, you have good control point that can feed into your variogram. You have good variogram function that will help you better property estimation, and by the time you actually estimate your in-place volume, your uncertainty is actually hugely reduced. So lastly, what are we saying? So we're saying that this is actually from Rocky Rodin, one of topmost geoscientists in the world. So he said machine learning is a disruptive technology, and artificial intelligence and machine learning will not replace geoscience interpreters. However, geoscience interpreters who do not use machine learning will be replaced by who do. So what we're saying invariably is that machine learning is not actually coming in to actually replace the traditional way of doing things. But what we're looking at is that how machine learning techniques can actually enhance the existing processes, can make it better, improve it, because these are algorithms, these are actually things that have been working for years, and then we've seen that in the exploration activities that have been going on. But how can we leverage these seismic attributes to actually improve estimation of all these properties? So I think that's all, and thanks once again for the opportunity.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Today. Thank you so much. This has been a very, very exploratory presentation. I really want to appreciate you on behalf of the NAPE YP for a job well done. For those of us that joined at the beginning, you could see that this was a very, very thorough topic that Mr. Tunde has done justice to. It took us, even for those of us that don't have that are not familiar with machine learning, you could see that it took us right from the very beginning, introducing us to what machine learning is about, the various types of algorithms that are out there, and even took us through the whole methodology, each step from data input down to the output, how we can apply machine learning in a petrophysical evaluation. So thank you very, very much, Mr. Tunde. I'm sure a lot of us have questions. So we're going to use this next couple of minutes to take some questions. So if you have questions, just raise your hand. I can see AGKAZ. But before we go into questions, I want to actually recognize the presence of the YP lead in the room, presence of Miss Flora, and this should be Miss Flora. Welcome. I think she will also take over from me very soon, but let's all just take some of the few questions that we have. and I'm sure Mr. Tunde is here to do justice to some of our questions. So the first person I have that his hand is up is AGKAZ. AGKAZ, please can you unmute and ask your question?
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. It's really far-reaching, I must say, and expository. Okay, I have just one question. My question is bothered about geological structures. Besides using spectral decomposition method, how can I actually integrate seismic attributes to better image team beds, or let me say for team bed identification and better imaging? Because just like you highlighted, the seismic data has the advantage of vertical resolution, while the well data, as the petrophysical data, has the better lateral resolution. So what we know that we have some imaging challenges with seismic data, especially when we're talking about beds or structures that are below the tuning thickness, as 1/4 of the seismic wavelength. So how can I use any of the seismic attributes with maybe some other well data to better image team bed specifically? I'm asking this question with a machine learning outlook. So when I say I want to integrate this, I want to integrate it in a machine learning model such that we team bed. So maybe I can use any of the instantaneous attributes that you've mentioned, maybe the instantaneous Q or instantaneous frequency. But basically, how can I integrate seismic attributes in machine learning to detect team beds? Thank you.
People, they are not.
Yes, sir. Did you get a question, sir?
So you're muted.
Mr. Tunde, if you're talking, you're muted, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. So though I didn't get it at some point, but let me just try to recap. So if I'm not getting it, then I can be corrected, if that is okay.
Okay, sir.
All right, so thank you. So what I just got is just basically how seismic attributes can be leveraged for the interpretation of team beds, if that's correct.
Yes, largely
Okay.
so.
Okay, all right. Yeah, thank you so much. So so just as mentioned, I think I showed a slide over there that we have various properties that we can say the seismic attributes actually have a good relationship with those particular properties. So maybe horizon and all of those things. So we could actually establish the attributes that actually have in terms of interpretation of our team beds. So get seismic attributes that good at that. Like just as we mentioned, instantaneous. Oh, sorry.
Hello,
I think
sir.
my network. Yes, my network went off for some seconds.
I couldn't hear him, sir. Okay.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
So
We
I
couldn't
think
hear you, sir.
okay, all right. So, but am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible now.
Okay, all right. So what I'm saying is that, just as mentioned, one key thing in terms of a machine learning problem is that we now first need to actually create that problem statement, which is what we're trying to do now. So you establish interpretation of team beds, and then next is to look at the data sets available to us. So it's possible the team bed we're talking about is a scenario whereby no well has actually logged that particular reservoir, or is actually a reservoir that a particular well it logged. We saw those team beds, but at some point, some wells that are far off the well that first saw it, other wells are not seeing it, or we're seeing a signature that is no longer looking like a team bed in those other wells that we're seeing. So we need to create scenarios like that. So for example, so if it were to be a bed that's actually been initially logged, and then what we're just trying to do is to actually interpret it and get the horizontal extent of that. Just as you mentioned, wells are my log data. I have good vertical resolution with my log data. But in terms of off the well location, well, physical data does not have well log data does not have good horizontal resolution, and that's why seismic data comes in. So once I can get the training, use the wells, train those, train the seismic attributes, get that particular relationship. So in this case now, I'm looking at a multi-attribute. So in this case, I attributes with one log data. So for example, let's say, so in this case now we're looking at lithology. So in this case now we're looking at lithology. So probably I might just want to pick my gamma ray, for example, to predict my gamma ray. So I pick multiple seismic attributes with my gamma ray with the existing well. I have that machine learning model. So what I can now do is that in areas that I have seismic attributes, I've understood that signature of those areas that I just predicted, just select some few locations of it and I predict it. But if it's a team bed that we're just seeing it in the seismic section and no well has actually logged it, then variably we'll just leverage the inversion alone, seismic inversion alone. So we'll just invert do the seismic inversion alone, and then with that we'll be able to actually see where the team bed is. So I don't know if that does justice to that or.
Yes, sir, it does justice, but the one of the challenges there is that usually when wells are drilled, team beds are not usually the target because seismic resolution does not necessarily pick team beds because of the tuning thickness of the source wavelength. So it's actually an ordinary problem inherently because team beds are not the target. Maybe because of it doesn't have good business sense, especially for the big companies. So usually the marginal fields are target for team beds exploration because they are useful for more indigenous companies who could be like a good mine for them. So my question is, because I'm not yet clear how I can get to really integrate any of these multi-seismic attributes to be able to now pick that team bed using that same seismic data, because seismic data alone on its own do not necessarily identify team beds because of this resolution. So
Yes. I think I perfectly see it. So just as you mentioned, and it's possible in some scenarios, team beds might not be the target, but you might have some wells that will just traverse it. So that might be a possible scenario. So you might not be the target, but by the time you traverse, you're not seeing team beds and you're not seeing opportunities, or maybe it's at easy hydrocarbon bearing and you now exploit. So just as mentioned, so it's in that scenario. So in that those team beds, so it's to just get for seismic attributes that has very good that is good for horizon interpretation. So in that case, team beds. So we just look one of those properties, and then you can use it to do the seismic inversion and see if the imaging could actually improve. But I think it's a discussion that we can also pick it up offline. Thanks.
okay, thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much. Can we have your question, Daniel? Daniel, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Daniel Moss.
Greetings.
Okay. Let's have it.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, sir. We can hear you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the presentation, sincerely. It was really, really fantastic, I must say. Gave a good overview of this. So I have a few questions, 3 actually. So the first is you talked about the training set and the split set and the testing set. So in this case, you're talking of the wells. So I understood that you had issues concerning the wells where you have to streamline them down to 4. So in a situation where, let's say, you didn't have that kind of issue, so from your wealth of experience, what would you say would be the controlling factor in choosing your training wells and your test wells? So that's the first question. Then secondly, I also understand that for petrophysical logs, there's something that is inherent. Most times we have missing values, missing readings, and all of that. So I know you may have encountered that while you were carrying out your analysis. So how did you handle the missing data? So which approach did you use that performed well for you? So I know that, several approaches, maybe using mean, median, or whatever. So I want to know which you used that performed so well for the model that you came up with. And finally, this is a regression model, like you said, rather than a classical classification problem. So you were predicting for porosity. So I'm now wondering which of the models you used that performed so well for you in this case. I know there are several models there, and looking at the sector we're in, there are unique models that can give us, good results. So I want you to say something about the particular model you used. Thank you so much.
Okay, all right. Yeah, thank you so much. So let me just start. The last question is, let me try to recap if I got all the questions. So the last question was the model that was used. I mentioned it's a regression problem. The machine learning model that was used. That's the third question. And then the second one is that you mentioned in cases whereby we are having missing logs. Because that's in cases whereby we are having missing log, that did I encounter such scenario and what did I do? That's the second question. But the first question, I didn't guess that well. So if you can just recap that, and then the second and third question, if that is what you actually said.
Okay, thank you so much. So the second one, so I didn't mean like missing logs. So I mean like missing values within the log. Yes.
Missing, yes. Here we just have that -999 and all of those.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes. So the first one, I'm talking about the approach you would use. So let's say in a case where you didn't have the issue you faced. So let's say you were having good R-square values and the wells were performing well. So generally, what approach would you use to choose your training wells and your testing wells? So let's assume you have I don't know, maybe 10, 20 wells to deal with, and let's say they are all good in terms of the petrophysical logs that you have there. They are all good, well to work with. So what approach will you use to group them into, okay, let me use this set for testing and this for training? So that's the first question.
Okay, all right. Yeah, thank you so much. I think I get that, and then I think I'll commend you for the questions too, because this is actually very good. And just as I mentioned that people have been doing a lot. Kudos to people what they've been doing with machine learning algorithms and all of those these days. But key thing that we need to do is actually establish the problem statement and how we want to go about it. So what we're even saying is that in this scenario whereby I want to use 10 wells, so what I'm advocating for is that I'm not even trying to develop a machine learning model that not at this, we shouldn't start from a very large scale that, we want to get the data for the whole of Niger Delta. I want to do that. I have 1,000 well logs. I have 1,000,000 log calls and all of this. We can start small from a particular reservoir that has maybe, just as you mentioned, 10 wells. So in the scenario whereby the training data sets and then the training data sets and for the prediction, I'm having good R-square value. So what that is basically telling me that, my system is actually homogeneous. And if I can use that to trace that back to my variogram, it means that the data sets, the spatial relationship is well established, meaning that there's no variation, no heterogeneity across all those wells. So in such scenario, if I now still want to drill down, if I want to have better estimation, I know I still want to improve this one. Maybe I'm having 0.91. Why can't I have 0.99? I want to now, with those ones that I'm predicting, and that's why I'm saying that this is something we can even start on a small scale. So I picked that particular reservoir. That reservoir has 10 wells, and when I'm training, maybe I just train with let's say 8 or 7 or 6 as the case may be, and by the time we are predicted I'm having good R squared. So what next should I just do? So probably this is where knowledge will now come into play. Now, okay, I can now look at those wells, the wells on the western flank. I can now group them based on the geology, based on our own understanding too. So I can now put that into play in how I want the prediction, the training and prediction to go. So you can now go further. And I know those well placements. So based on the area that I want to predict a well, so I can try to now concentrate more on the wells around that place for my training data set. So for example, if I'm using 10 before, so the well I want to predict is actually maybe there are 5 wells around that well, I could reduce it to 5. I could reduce it to 5 wells for wells that are around the wells that I want to predict, so that I know that properties will be similar around that place, so that, and then my prediction will be better. So that's what for that first question. So in such scenario, what we can just bring into place, okay, what's the understanding of the problem I'm dealing with, to the geology, the top structure, so that when we're looking at this thing, we're not just isolating it. For example, because what I've seen people do this is that they just pick up, oh, it's the machine learning model, just get the old data of Gulf of Mexico, get the old data of Niger Delta, and then be training. With that, we're not even bringing into play the understanding of the structure and all of those things that we're really looking at. So in such scenario, what I'll look at, can even still look at the structure. Oh, this is where I want to predict the properties, pick 5 words around that place, use it for training. By that time, you know that the prediction of what you'll be getting will be similar to those words you use for your training data sets. So that's what I'll actually advocate in such scenario. So in scenario whereby I have missing logs, a missing section of logs. So for example, let me say gamma ray, for example, and the gamma ray that I have, maybe from the last file I have from, let's say, 4,000 to 12,000 to the TD of the well. That's the gamma ray. But within that, I'm having some missing section, maybe from 6,000 to 8,000. The data sets, no, nothing, maybe 2 malfunction. A whole lot can happen that could make this happen. Now we normally see them a lot. So in such scenarios, what can be done? So just as we said, there's no data available at that particular section. So what can be done too is that we can now still leverage. So meaning that in such scenarios, just making the watch, and depending on the level of detail you want to put. So for that particular well, if you still want to estimate those properties, then what we definitely do is that those wells, is possible similar wells that are close by, they can have, let's say, within those intervals, there's gamma ray for those wells, those 3. So maybe a particular well now does not have that gamma ray between 6,000 and 8,000. And then around that particular well, I have like 6 wells. And those wells within those intervals, they have gamma ray log and all of those, the gamma ray signature is okay and all. So what I can do in such scenarios are, just as we've mentioned, these seismic attributes, we know that we have 2 approaches to it. Majorly, 2 approaches majorly. Either we're using a single seismic attribute with multiple well logs, or we're using multiple seismic attributes with single well log. So in such scenario, what we just want to do is that we can now try to even predict in that interval if you're just trying to do that. So probably you can just still use multiple seismic attributes with your gamma ray, for example, establish that relationship with the wells that has the wells existing. So you can even do, if you have 5 wells, for example, you can do it with 4. So meaning that, because for you to deploy, so in this case now you want to deploy it and predict for that well that does not exist. But before you deploy, you need to test. So maybe you have 4 wells, use 3 wells for training, use 1 well for prediction. And if that, just tweak around, check if you have good R squared within that section, you can do that prediction, at least have something fair, and then use that, complete that section, and then progress with whatever activity, whatever analysis you want to do. And on the last case, the last question about which algorithm was used, you will use SG Boost. That was the algorithm that was used. So for the linear regression problem, it was SG Boost. The gradient boost, now extreme gradient boost, that was the algorithm that was used for this problem.
Thank you so much. I hope that answered your question, Mr. Daniel.
Yeah, thank you so much. You actually answered the question. But just the last follow-up to that, just to be clear as per how you handled the missing data. So let's say you are working with that particular field there. That's the one I'm talking of now. Or let's say reservoir in your case. So the typical machine learning flow, you would want to use maybe the median, the mean, interpolate and all of that. So I was just being inquisitive as to which performed well, especially in this FG boost that you used. You know, it's kind of robust to all of this. So is it the main or, but you were saying something like using a nearby field. So let's assume you don't want to use something from another field and you want to use something from within. So that's the point I'm making, like which will perform well with your XP boost.
So sorry, I think it must be from my hand. I think my network malfunctioned a little. I didn't get that last part.
Okay, so I'm appreciating the response you gave, which was very apt. So I'm saying concerning the missing part, that's the missing sections of the well. So
Yes.
I'm not asking, yes. You know, you said something about using maybe a nearby field, using like the GRO log you said, or
Okay,
maybe
okay, so okay, no, that particular one is not nearby field. I'm talking about for that particular reservoir.
okay.
So wells that are not far off. So for that particular reservoir, so for that well now, let's say I have 5 wells on that reservoir. So and one of the well, the log is missing. So you just look at wells that are nearby. You can use that for your training sets. So because we're trying to, just as I mentioned, we're trying to start from a very small scale, or the ones around us before we now start, because if you're going to another field or another, so that means that heterogeneity that we can't even anticipate what we'll actually encounter. And that's where we must have trained with a whole lot of data for us to deploy a model in a particular field, as train a model in a particular and go and deploy it in another field, meaning that we must have trained the data set with all possible scenario. But in this case, now, if we're just dealing with a reservoir, okay, it's localized, and then the expectation of in terms of heterogeneity, we don't expect drastic change of properties like that. So in that particular case, I'm looking at wells on that reservoir. That will even be the ones you use for that prediction for the second question. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. Yeah, thank you so much for your response. So not that this is not that this is being dragged, but I'm looking at that section. You know, you're looking at a well that was a log that was missing. So I'm saying that section of the GR that is missing, or the section
Yes.
of the aha. So that's
Yeah.
section that was missing. Did you use another well, that particular region, that section, to run your model?
Exactly.
Or you
Yes. Exactly. So, and then that would, in that case, before the one you use, your correlation will actually still come into play. So, for example, now, so let's explain in scenarios whereby it's not faulted, there's no throw, and all of those things. So, so based on the formations that are above and below that, let's say from 6,000 to 8,000, you have your missing section. So, other wells that are close by, within that range, there's data set. But that does not mean that the sand package you're missing between 6,000 and 8,000 in well A will be the sand package that will be missing between 6,000 and 8,000 in well B. So meaning that in that particular case, your correlation will even come into play. So you can even try and correlate and see the sands that are above and below those interval you want to correlate. Just try and still get your correlation right and know those interval you want to predict. You can even pick it based on your correlation. So those wells that are nearby the one you want to predict, those ones that are nearby, you use them for that prediction. So the training you're doing, you're training it on wells that are nearby. So meaning that in terms of horizontal extent, that lithology is actually, you're anticipating that is consistent across. So maybe you have 2 wells at the flank of the one that is missing now. So what you're just saying, that, okay, based on the correlation that I have, I still have it continuous. So that is what will make, at least, make you have confidence in what you're actually estimating. So by the time you correlate, you see the sand package that is missing, you see the gamma ray within that section, you could pick those wells and use it, get multiple seismic attributes, use it for training, and then if it's a field that has 3D seismic and built from your seismic cube, all the attributes that you use for training, just extract it from that particular well and use it for prediction.
Thank you so much. Perfectly understood now. Thank you.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So some people are asking if this presentation is going to be made available. Yes, the recording will be made available, and you will receive it when it's available on the different groups that we are. So next question, next we have on the list is Kashi Beji. Please, your question. So just take two last questions from Kashi and Chijoke. Then I think we'll be done for today. Okay, Munirat as well. So let's just go on with that. Kashi, your question, please.
Thank you very much, sir. And thanks for the presentation, Mr. Tunde. It's a really nice presentation and I appreciate it. Ultra. So my question, I have a few questions, and okay, my first question, if you have a well-logged as input data or well-logged data as inputs, or well-logged data as your input for a predictive regression model, and you want to perform the predictive regression model, and say you don't have the labels, so you're unable to perform a classification task, oh sorry, a regression task, you don't have the labels available for some reason, we are unable to get the labels, and you really have to do that task. So how do you go about it without the labels for a predictive regression task for a petrophysical um, parameter? How do you go about it without the labels? Like, is there any way to go about generating labels for a predictive task and using it to work on your model, and using to work without original labels? So is there a way to generate, say you want to do a porosity, you want to find the porosity now, and you don't have the porosity labels. So is there a way to generate the porosity from your input data, like sort of generate an artificial label and use it to train your data? And if so, how does it work and how well will it perform? That is my first question. And my second question is, working with some well-log data, I came across a term known as despiking, especially in sonic logs. The spiking in the analysis aspect and cleaning aspect, there's something they call despiking. So I use this, but I don't really get the significance. So if you can shed more light on that, I'll appreciate it really. Then lastly, say you want to, you have seismic data, but your seismic data, what you want to use it to do is like find faults in the seismic data. Like, you want to create a model that helps geologists analyze seismic data to discover faults and some other necessary objects. What type of data will you use as your input so that you'll be able to create that model that will help them analyze faults and features within the subsurface? Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Tunde, did you hear him, sir?
Yes, I heard. So let me just try to recap. So you mentioning the last question you mentioned that if you want to, now what type of seismic attributes is actually if you want to do fault interpretation, the seismic attributes that you can use, that is good for fault interpretation, right? That's the third question.
Yes, sir. What seismic data we
Yes.
use as your input for fault interpretation?
Okay, and then the second one, I didn't really get that. And then I remember your first one, you're saying that if you want to set up a problem but you don't have the data labels, how to go about it. So, but the second one, I think I missed that.
Okay, so my second question was that while working with some well-log data, I come across something known as despiking of the well-log data, despiking. Some well-logged data like sonic log, they usually have sharp spikes, and I discovered that it would be nice if you can reduce such spikes. So there are like written codes that can help with that already, but I really want to understand the concepts behind the spiking and why it's important.
Okay. All right. Okay. So let me just start from the first one. So just as I've said, so if you want to just start from, just as you mentioned, from your machine learning, trying to create your problem statement. So meaning that you're looking at actually predicting a particular data set. So from your problem statement, you should be able to actually, okay, we've identified these are the input variables that I want to use for setting up a machine learning model, and then that our data be used for prediction. So if, I don't know, I know you're working on the project, but it will be nice.
We lost Mr. Tunde. Can you hear us? We lost you for a while.
Yes, sorry, I think my network. So I think, for example, so let me just go back for a few seconds. So what I'm saying, for setting up machine learning problem, for example, I said if it's in terms of log prediction, for example, so based on the logs that I want to use, I'm either using maybe density log, using porosity log, I'm using gamma ray, I'm using resistivity. Those are the labels that we want to be talking that will be fed into the data set. But in scenario whereby the data sets now that we're using in terms of establishing what the labels are like in terms of the data sets, because that's actually like distinctive words that will actually help the model. That will help the model. So if you are particular, maybe clarify the particular pinpoint, maybe I'll be able to actually attend to that. But just as I've said, if you're actually imputing a machine learning model and then you don't have, that means in that case, there's not enough training data sets to actually establish that relationship, because that's what the algorithm will actually use to establish those relationships. Because if we can't establish the parameters for the relationship to be established, then it's the model that we'll get won't be predictive too. So it's more of like send someone to maybe primary school, and at the end of the day, they are setting an exam, they are bringing an exam of maybe that is in higher institution or something. So that would just be like a similar case, because just as I mentioned from beginning, when we're talking of the world of in terms of automation and all of those things, though machine learning has come in to actually improve things. We're talking about deep learning, make machine programs to think about like human brains. You have various neurons and all of those things. But at first, when you're training your model, you can see it's problem statement. So if we don't have that, then we need to look for a way to have a very good data set for that training, because if that is not done, then meaning that everything that is coming downstream of that too will actually you have that error will be inherent in them rather, and then that will cascade down to other activities. So I just
Hello. Mr. Tunde, can you still hear us? Mr. Tunde, are you there, sir? I think we lost Mr. Tunde. His network, I think he's logged out, maybe due to his network. Okay, so pending when Mr. Tunde logs back in, let's Miss Flora, are you still here? Okay, Miss Flora, can you hear me? Hello. Hold on, please. Let me just try and reach out to Mr. Tunde. I think he's having a bit of network challenge. Yeah, Mr. Tunde, you're welcome, sir. Oh, he has gone out again. Oh,
I guess it's his network. We just have to be patient with him.
okay.
Hello, Samuel Juto. I think Mr. Tunde is waiting in the lobby.
Okay, let me chat him off.
Still okay, please come. Hear me.
I'm letting him in. I'm letting him in. It just, I think it's his network because it's showing admitting. So, I think he's in. Mr. Tunde, welcome, sir. Mr. Tunde, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I think the network on your
Sorry,
end.
sincere. Yes, sincere apologies. I just this one just went off. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
I think you've answered the question by the last
remaining two questions.
Yes. So
Yes,
Munirat,
I think it's remaining two.
Yeah, Munirat, can you
Okay.
just ask your question so that we can round up the questions and
All my
answer
questions
section?
are still left.
Hey, got you.
Munirat, can you unmute and answer your questions?
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful presentation. I really learned a lot. Thank you, sir. Please, I would like to ask that I'm an undergraduate, but I have a basic understanding of seismic interpretation and petrographic interpretation as well. But I would like to know more about how I can implement machine learning into the understanding of this, like, and other aspects of oil and gas industry. But I don't really know how to go about it. Like, is there like a roadmap I can follow on how to have like better understanding of this, or like a training you can recommend I should go for to have a better understanding of how to apply machine learning in other aspects of oil and gas? Thank you, sir.
Okay, all right. Yeah, thank you so much, Munirat. I think just as you mentioned, the first step is actually that intention, which is the one you've taken. And then also, just as I mentioned, that with the advent of machine learning, still forget about the underlying principles. Because what I've seen those days is that people want just to build machine learning models and all. And the geology that is actually inherent, geology understanding about the data set and everything will just be totally overlooked. You said you're good, understand the whole of the seismic interpretation, periophysical log interpretation, which is perfect. And it's actually a very good leverage to start. It's a very good starting point. So I think the next is just, I think I'm talking from the seismic interpretation, you know what we mean by seismic inversion and all of those things. So from there, it's just to actually start picking up trying to learn about machine learning, machine learning algorithms and all of those. So I think it's just more by step machine learning algorithms, and then try to create a problem statement. You could create a mini project, because I believe that while learning, we should have our goals, objectives. So just create a very mini project, and then just try to learn and try to execute along, because as you're learning, if you're not actually doing it, you just see that you're forgetting. So, but try to learn, and then a lot of courses online on Coursera, just go there, machine learning, introduction to machine learning and all of those. And then there are also a lot of people around that you can also reach out to. I think we need better explanation, but I think lots of sites, Coursera, a lot of courses there for free that you can make give you a very good head start into machine learning and artificial intelligence as a whole. So thanks.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Thank you so much. Before I give the mic to the YP lead, I just want to read some questions in the chat box. There's a question from Miriam. He said, do you advise one to use a density log looking at the sensitivity to the log? And a follow-up question says, please, can you highlight properly the difference between forecasting and prediction, and how accurate the available sequence models available are? Let me read the questions again. The first one says, do you advise one to use a density log looking at the sensitivity to the log? Then the follow-up says, please, can you highlight properly the difference between forecasting and prediction, and how accurate are the available sequence models that are available out there? How accurate are they? Thank you. That will be the last question, sir.
Okay, all right, sir. So sorry, I didn't get the first one. It said the first one is do you advise to use density log looking at sensitivity to log? I didn't get. Is that the question?
Yes, he said.
Okay, so
yeah.
Okay, sorry, continue. I can just.
Yeah, it says, do you advise to use density log looking at the sensitivity to the log?
Okay, but I didn't really get that, but I think I can try to explain. Because just as we mentioned, data cleaning is actually very important, and all this, just as we mentioned, falls back to the basic understanding of all these petrophysical properties and all of those things. So you mentioned that your density log, what's your density actually looking at? Your matrix, what you're looking at, you're looking at your density and all of those. So if you have, depending on the properties, depending on the log acquisition and all of those things. So log, if the logging is okay, and then properties actually the log curve is representative of what you expected it to be. So the log density log is actually a good fit. You can use it. You can use any of the logs. The major thing is to ensure that along that section, the training data set you're using is not area where you too malfunctioned. Maybe you're in shale, and then your density is just, you're seeing density similar to where you have gas. Your very low density is not. So just try to QC the data first. Make sure it makes sense, and then any of the logs can be used. And then the second one is saying difference between forecasting and prediction.
Yeah.
So to me, I'll not. So to me, I'll say it's basically saying the same thing but using different terms. So what you're looking at is it could be, for example, in those of our engineers, they do production forecasts. So but what they are doing is actually prediction too. So it's more of like they're the same thing, but you're just using different terms. So what you're using, so in terms of machine learning now, so we're predicting what that log is. So what I can bring into play is just the time element. So some persons, maybe if they are bringing, so I think they're just basically the same, because what we're doing is we're prediction. So, but maybe by the time we're looking like time time data, like time-related data. We're trying to forecast into the future, but looking at the physics and everything that we can just say is more of the same thing, and then just different times. Because for ARIS, they do ember prediction. So predicting based on the reservoir models, they predict production. So, and then we'll talk about they're doing ember forecast. So it's more of like different things, but almost invariably the same meaning with the way we use it in the industry. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Tunde. I think because of our time, that will be all that we can take for now. The recordings to this presentation will be uploaded on our YouTube page and made available to all, so you can go back to listen to the whole presentation again. For now, I will give the floor to our YP lead, Ms. Flora Anishobi. Ms. Flora, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Siloko. Thank you, Mr. Tunde Farotimi. Can you all hear me? I'm sorry, I'm not speaking to myself. Siloko, please confirm you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you
all right,
very
thank
well.
you so much. Also, thank you on behalf of NAPE, YP committee and the community and the executives. I want to say a very big thank you, Mr. Tunde, for taking out your time to share your vast knowledge and experience with the YPs as regards to statistical modeling using machine learning. I joined in late, but the time I joined, I think I really learned so much. At least this will also keep the YPs more like give them this attitude that machine learning and AI is not here to take away our jobs, basically, but we're just here to use machine learning and AI as a technological tool to help to enhance our job and give us better results and better predictions and better solutions. And so with that note, I want to say thank you so much for taking your time to share with us this vast experience. Before that, I'll hand over to the moderator who was supposed to start the event, but due to network issues, he had so we're going to give out the announcement that we have, talk about our programs that's upcoming and those who've done so far. I don't know if Peter Bass is on the line, and if he is, then please kindly take over. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lead. I hope you can hear me. Hello? Hello?
We can hear you.
Yes, you can. You can. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Tunde Farotimi, for such an insight. Really appreciate this. And a very quick one, the NAPE YP announcement. The charity visits to the homeless, the homes of the blind, that took place in the month of March. We actually had a great one, and we made certain the donations, food items, clothing items, and it was actually a memorable one. While on the 6th of the same month, of March, we still have the NAPE technical business meeting, which took place at Eco Hotel. And eventually as well, we still had the White NAPE Northeast technical workshop that held at the University of Maiduguri. It was actually also quite a memorable one as well. And just to also remind us for our active members, as regards our YP dues, please, you can kindly reach out to a BOA or a YP lead for more guidance, especially active members, for you to have your membership renewed. While for student membership, please, you can also reach out to your president, your chapter president, who can also be a guide, and that will be done. Now, also to the next webinar, on behalf of myself, the YP technical crew, the YP lead, a very big thank you once again to our facilitator for today, 16th March 2024, where the webinar was held, and they were having Mr. Rotimi as our facilitator for today, giving us quite a memorable insight into today's learning. We really appreciate you, sir. Thank you very much. And for everyone that also came on board, we really appreciate you. Thank you very, very much. for being part of this. And also, let's also be reminded of our NAPE Mentors Hangout with Dr. Lai Fatona, FNAPE, FNAPE. So please, I'd like us to have that on our calendars recorded to be taking place on the 23rd of this month, March 2024. So please, I'd like us to have that on the mind. So that will be the last event for the month of March. So please kindly take note. Once again, thank you very, very much. And as well, like I said earlier, on behalf of the technical crew and our lead, President Flora, we really appreciate you. Thank you very, very much. From me, Peter Bassi, the moderator for today, it is bye-bye for now. Have a great weekend. Thank you very much. See you in the next webinar technical session. God bless you.
All right, thanks again. Thanks again for this opportunity, and thanks everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Mr. Today. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.